Let's begin.
Hey there, pasta freaks! It's time for another unbearable upload. Unbearable for me, that is. So, watch your children closely, and don't change the channel. It's time for the horror episode you've been waiting for. 1999. Off the Air.
I've said this before, but I'm not only validated in my reiteration. It may not have ever been more of a relevant application than it is right now. I was hoping to never return to this story. I know all who have listened to my story thus far have heard this phrase more than once. But this time, not only do I mean it, but I never intended to deliver this chapter, a hopeful finale to my torment of the last nearly 4 years. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the events of my life that revolve around 1999, allow me to sum up. Late in the summer of 2014, I became intrigued by the story of 1999, that ominous man in a bear costume that abducted children and burned them to death in a pit in the woods of southern Canada, and related information that may have proven Elliot's story true. My initial investigation ended with me being contacted and pursued by a man claiming to be Mr. Bear, a man who seemingly targeted my family with the help of a few of you, namely an individual named John Mitch. I had discovered that the person who had reached out to me, taking on the Mr. Bear persona, had an IP address that placed him not more than 5 miles from my house. Preposterous as that may sound, this particular update ended with a detailed analysis of Elliot's story, hinting towards and basically proving that the perpetrator in Elliot's story indeed had help and did not work alone. Terrified and unsettled, I forewent the investigation for a while, but just as with now, I was forced to return to the topic when cryptic emails and photographs began finding their way into my inbox, begging for further investigation. Along the way, I had made correlations between the kidnappings in Canada and the disappearances of childhood friends, such as Courtney. I followed leads into very dangerous situations, only to find items such as an old stuffed animal and photographs of my very own daughter. The only possible hint at a flesh and blood perpetrator being the ominous presence of an old beat-up red pickup truck, noticed at least twice, once by myself and once by the Coymans police. Which, by the way, is another reason why I've been avoiding this story, the report of instances, because its reveal could land me in some pretty hot water. But it's more likely that the events of this story will go unbelieved, and said ignorance may yet be my salvation. And yet, even more than that, I'm afraid to stir things up again. You have to realize that things have been quiet for me for nearly a year, without instance of cryptic emails, ominous envelopes in my mailbox, or any other indication that danger is anywhere near me, and that both me and my family may be free from this nightmare. But I digress. We're here now, and it's far too late to turn back. So, what period of time are we referring to? Well, take yourself back to May 2017, approximately 1 year from the time of the release of this video. If you've been following the events of this maniacal stalker and myself, you'll know that the last report delivered was back in February, a few months prior to the time of these events. Not only had the police sworn me to secrecy regarding the events of this ongoing saga, so as to not impose upon their investigation, for those 2 to 3 months, there was nothing to report anyway. Time progressed, much as it has since the events of that night. The world and society moving on uncaringly, as if nothing happened. But then again, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, etc. And in the same respect, how was I to know that something truly insidious was coming my way? It was an ordinary spring day like any other, and my family and I were enjoying what we have come to know as Family Fun Day Sunday. Okay, corny and cliche, I know, but most of you, my loyal listeners, know just how busy I am, especially while I was attending university. Thus, the appointment of a day to entirely spend with my wife and kids, devoted to them, is a must of maintaining a healthy environment regarding my home life. One of the more favored places we frequent is a place called the Hannaquah Preserve, a beautiful stretch of protected forest land that spans between 2 counties, sporting miles of wooded walking trails, running streams and waterfalls, historic landmarks such as a foundation for a century-old New York paper mill, and a vast array of wildlife. My wife, my 2 daughters, and I would spend hours out there, walking miles and miles every Sunday morning and afternoon. In actuality, we had really lucked out last spring and summer, and I can't recall any particular Sunday on which it rained. Now, we would pick out different spots throughout the following months, hike a variety of trails, but this one is so much closer to our home, so very secluded, and in parts, still breathtaking, and at the very least, peaceful. Of course, we all know that peace and quiet can be deceiving, and sometimes signals the approach of incoming menace. Maybe it was this deception, or maybe it was just the usual happenstance of coming across beat-up red pickup trucks. I do live close to a very rural community, but I never really got that foreboding feeling in my gut, telling me to beware. Sure, I know, I remembered seeing that truck and that old dirt lot at least once, and possibly more than that, but the ambiguity presented with both common vehicle type and color, I can't honestly tell you how many times I spotted that old truck there. Surely, one might guess that its presence had been more prominent than initially realized. It had been getting late into the spring, nearly summer, and this particular Sunday was just like any of the others that had come before it. The one difference being is that on this day, I was teaching my little girl about bird songs, teaching her to identify various species by their call alone. If you know me, you know I grew up in the woods. Acres and acres of isolated forest land was my playground growing up. For hours, I would just sit in the woods, listen to the calls of distant birds in the trees, and sometimes whistle back, attempting to imitate their unique song in an attempt at a half-assed reply. I could have been saying "fuck off" in avian, but I never would have known the difference, only reveling as I could frequently prompt a subsequent reply from my feathered friend. In time, I not only learned to mimic these calls, I learned quite a bit about several of the common bird species native to the northeast of the United States. Specifically, I can imitate sparrows, finches, warblers, blue jays, and mourning doves, teaching my little girl to whistle, and with a cacophony of chirping in the surrounding treetops, hearing a call back, distinctively, could have easily missed my notice. So, maybe it wasn't on the first try, or maybe the second, or maybe it was. Honestly, I can't tell you how long someone else was replying back to our calls, mimicking the bird in which we intended to imitate, and whoever it was, they were much better at it than I am. When I had first noticed, the sound was distinctively human, somewhat distant, and obviously in direct reply to us, so much so that even my wife turned her head and asked me if I had heard it. I did, and acknowledged as such, but pondered silently beyond that, waiting a moment or two for another call, scanned the tree line northeast of where we stood. I hushed my daughter and my wife, waiting a few more moments before letting out another bird call, and then another. Only the birds replied back, and for the rest of our walk, the instance was nothing more than queer, and I completely forgot about it. Well, that is, I forgot about it until the three of us came back down the hill that led up to the forest on the ridge, so as to get back to our car. There, in that dirt lot, sat an unassuming, yet somehow familiar, red pickup truck. I'll pause here to deliver to you a revelation, one that I believe no longer matters, as it likely no longer applies. The one primary fact that the Coymans police did not want me to disclose in these reports, above all else, is that the implicated perpetrator, stalking homes at night in his signature bear costume, was also reportedly, on occasion by those individuals making the call, in more than one instance, a red pickup truck had either been seen near or leaving the premises around the time of the sightings. I was told that this fact wasn't nearly consistent enough to inherently tie into this Night Stalker, but had been a component of enough of these stories that they felt, if I were to reveal it prematurely, that this would give our assailant both information and time enough to change his tactics and further conceal his trail. So by now, I'm sure you can likely understand why I saw that truck in that parking lot and it seemed so familiar. Now, I've said before that I can't be sure if I had seen it there or not on previous occasions, but on the other hand, I can't tell you how many times I would spot an old red pickup truck on the road and wonder. And I suppose that's just the thing, the commonality of it. But something told me, deep in my gut, that this one was different. And just to be sure, I memorized the license plate, wrote it down after I returned home, to be referenced later. That later point would be initiated by the next incident, again at the same place, about 3 weeks later. Licensed and tackle in hand, I was taking my wife and youngest daughter on a hiking/fishing excursion. Now, we didn't choose the exact same spot for nostalgia or inquisitive purposes, only that it sat beside a running creek. Now, I'm being honest here, and I see no reason anymore to dilute a thing. Long story short, the missus and I proceeded to have a seat after a while at a small wooden pavilion, at about 15 feet from our daughter, well within eyeshot, and proceeded to spark up a bowl. Bad parenting? Maybe, but honest nonetheless. I don't know how, but it took about 3 puffs apiece into the bowl before someone had noticed it, namely my wife. Standing up and grabbing it from the post to which it was nailed, my wife began to ask me, "What is this?" but slowly cut herself off before she could finish those 3 words as she turned to face me. Instantly, I identified the notable fear in her expression, the trembling of her hands, and the welling of tears the longer she held whatever it was that was in her shaky grasp. My first response was to attend to her, making sure to keep a watchful eye on my youngest while doing so, trying to console my wife while attempting to determine the source of her dismay. After all, whatever it was she had was on a small, square piece of paper and could pose no immediate danger. But what I thought was a mere scrap of paper from the back actually depicted a photograph on the front. Once realizing this, I refocused my attention to the picture, taking it in my hand. In the first few moments, there was silence as I interpreted the image. Then, a few more moments of silence as I internally reasoned with the image in my very hand that shouldn't have been there. It was a picture of me, my wife, my teenage daughter, and our youngest, while we stood on the trail, not far from where we now sat, capturing the events of me teaching my little girl to whistle to birds. Once I realized this, I remembered that ominous whistle in reply from somewhere in the woods. Needing to tend to my wife and protect my family, I told my wife that the picture could have been taken by anyone and left in some benign manner. After all, how would anyone know where and when we would be coming by here? Still, I told my youngest, to her dismay, that we needed to go home. Of course, she was curious as to why, but I did the parental thing and negated her questions with generalized answers. She is a little older and getting smarter every day, but I still had her and her mother convinced that nothing was truly wrong eventually. But as I drove home, one thought echoed over and over again behind my spoken words, only for me to hear. Was there any connection between this photograph and that old red truck? When I returned home, I got the little one all set up with Minecraft, and my wife sitting down, engrossed in binge-watching Netflix with my teenage daughter, before I retrieved the piece of scrap paper I had placed into my desk after I had written down that plate number on it. I clumsily fumbled around with trying to unlock the mysteries of researching a license plate. I am no cyber detective, and after coming up with a whole lot of nothing, was about ready to, once again, hand over the information to the police. Before I did, however, as a result of racking my brain, I decided on a last-ditch effort before I did, and reached out to an individual I hadn't spoken to in years. John Mitch. For those of you who don't recall, John Mitch served as an integral component of delivering the revelations contained within the Caledon Local 21 profile. I literally have not spoken with John beyond a couple of months following its release. I wasn't even sure if the email address that I had to dig for was still valid, but I typed up the details of the previous events, along with the plate number, and asked him if he could help. I wouldn't receive a reply for 2 anxiety-filled days. During this time of my life, I was in a bit of a transition. Construction work had nearly run dry for the time being, and I was looking to maybe do something with one of my college degrees. So, what this equates to is that for a few weeks, I was unemployed. When the email came back from John, I got it immediately, and I was a bit shocked, likely the only hesitation I had before opening it and reading what he had to say. I don't want to give out street addresses or names, as I feel anonymity is a must at this point, but the short of it explained how the plate was not only registered under an elderly gentleman whose birth date would have placed him in his mid-90s, but meant that there was an extreme probability of whoever was stalking me and my family. It was not this icon of frailty. Also disclosed, reinforcing my assumption, was that the license plate was registered to a 1994 Corolla, which is not a pickup truck. This guy was driving on fraudulent plates, and it was this fact that had me convinced that whoever was driving that old red truck, parked in the lot 2 days prior, was likely the same individual I had seen a year prior, stalking me outside a run-down, dilapidated home that promised an artifact of further discovery, an old stuffed bear with an attached cryptic message. when I saw that old truck that day, I couldn't be sure of its intent. Now, assumption had been solidified into belief. Armed with a little more knowledge than I had previously, I was now on alert for what may be presumed to be unexpected. Now, this is the part of the story that my life will take an unexpected turn, at least for me and what I know to be most of you. I read comments regarding on how it is hoped that there will be some kind of epic battle between me and this alleged Mr. Bear. But to tell you the truth, for a while, I have expected everything to end in a similar way myself. It was maybe 2 or 3 nights later, when I had informed my wife that I was going for a drive, to go grab a few monsters and a bag of Funyuns. It's my game fuel. However, while on this ride, and in the heart of Coyman's Hollow anyway, I figured I would just take a drive up to that now closed for the night nature preserve, hoping to maybe get a glimpse of that old red pickup truck. There are no streetlights on this road, and very little traffic, more so as you head away from town. Nearing the turn for the dirt driveway, I slowed and began to prepare for a U-turn, knowing the entrance would be gated off for the night. There was no truck, no indication of any looming presence, and because there are no lights, I didn't see his form until it was 20 or less feet from the hood of my car. He was unmistakable, or at least, I still hope so. Because the moment I identified that furry brown suit, gloved hands, and that bear mask sporting terribly glossy black eyes, I knew it had to be him. The man who had been stalking me, pursuing my children for over 3 years. I was coming to a halt for the turn, and as close as he was, I still had plenty of time to stop, if I wanted to. But I didn't. And instead, I slammed my foot back onto the gas and took aim with my steering wheel. Everything happened in an instant, and everything was over before I'd even known it. But in that moment, those microseconds felt as though they lasted a lifetime, and I don't think I'll ever be able to forget the thump sound his body made when it collided with my hood. I sped home blank-minded, not looking in the mirror or checking any damage. I told my wife I hit a deer. I did my best to push it out of my mind. Unsuccessfully. There are many people who claim that, if needed, they can kill another human being. I'd always claimed to be one of these people. And through my actions, I suppose I proved myself right. But would I be able to repeat this recourse if I needed? Honestly, I don't know. The guilt has been weighing on me. Well, since it happened, I guess. I even went back a few weeks later, after I had gotten the bodywork on my car completed, and in broad daylight. I saw some traffic, a few cars parked in the lot, spotted from the road, and nothing else. Deciding to investigate further, I parked my car, right there at the entrance, and left it running, and got out. First, I approached the ditch, half expecting to see blood or a patch of fake fur, but of course I saw nothing. Before I climbed back into the driver's seat, however, I decided to check across the street, just for the hell of it. Everything at this time of year is bright, fluorescent green, and though about 30 yards away, down a steep embankment, the dark brown outline of an empty bear costume was plainly spotted. Empty. This thought sent literal shivers up my spine, and I raced away from the scene as fast as I could. And that is the report so many of you have been begging me to tell, asking me if anything else has happened since the publication of 1999 local television. Is it over? I don't know. I do know that since that night, everything has been quiet and serene, at least the world outside my own head. I didn't honestly expect to find myself wrestling with guilt over the possible homicide of a child murderer. But then again, what if I was somehow wrong and killed an innocent? It's not like I stopped and asked him any questions. And what happened to the body in that now empty bear suit? Did I really kill anyone? I may not ever know for sure. And that's honestly okay with me. In actuality, there's a lot of questions I'll never have answered. Such as, whatever happened to my childhood friend, Courtney? Whatever happened to Elliot? Is he living torment-free now, like myself? Who are all those kids in those videos and pictures sent to me? If there was anyone else unfortunate to be kidnapped by that monster, and I did indeed kill him, then those innocents are surely dead via starvation and neglect by now. I may wonder these and many, many more things for many years to come. But honestly, I've learned to let the possibility of answers go. And if any of you have learned anything from all of this, so should you.
And there you have it. Anticlimactic? Maybe, but truthful nonetheless. And the truth, in this case, will certainly not set one free. But if you're free, make sure to drop in again next weekend for another trip down Memoir Lane. And until then, Pasta Creeps, remember, evil will come looking for those who seek it.
Social media can be very unpredictable, especially regarding horror content. If this content gets removed, all new content will be simultaneously presented on various websites provided in the description to this video. Make sure to follow me in other digital spaces so that you never miss out on the terror. Also, if you like this video, make sure to leave a comment and hit the like button. It helps the channel a lot. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy what's here, consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you never miss an upload. Writing is a dream of mine, and it's all of you that make that dream come true.